Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to the Mortician and the Veterinarian, episode 5. This is Derek.
That's Heather.
And this is our guest host, Mink. And just to clarify, he's the veterinarian.
She's the mortician.
Well, not anymore, but I used to be.
Shh.
Nobody needs to know that. I did it for 6 years. It still counts.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually coming up on my 1-year anniversary of not being a mortician anymore.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. So this is kind of meta. We're doing like an episode inside of an episode because...
Why's that?
I'm recording. I'm recording for a podcast called Fast Forward. And so I'm recording what my days would be like if I recorded my days. So I've got the recorder going while we're recording this, and it feels like I'm in Inception. Wow. That was my version of the Inception sound.
Have you seen Inception?
I have.
Have you really?
Yeah, I have. Are you surprised? I saw it in theaters.
I'm surprised, everybody, because Heather is one of the people who has seen fewer movies than any other person that I've ever met.
That makes me sound awful.
Well, it's odd because you're so up to date on pop culture and everything. Anyways.
I do a lot of my pulp culture through reading. My pulp culture. My pulp culture.
Did you say pulp culture or your pulp culture?
My pulp culture.
Nice.
Pulp fiction, pulp culture.
I am very familiar with pulp fiction pop culture. So we are on our way to the tattoo studio. I'm going to go get tattooed. Pretty excited about it.
Which tattoo are you getting?
So I just worked on this piece, which is a picture of my dog Roland as a saint. He's actually wearing Jesus clothes. Don't tell anybody that because it's a little bit sacrilegious. But I got this big blank empty spot, and we're going to put my dog Harper as Joan of Arc, or as we've been calling her, Joan of Bark. And she's going to have a crown of laurel leaves, and she's going to be holding a spear. She's going to look particularly badass and awesome.
She is badass and awesome.
She's a fierce little beast. She's yeah. We just found out recently that she has a heart murmur. So
unfortunately, she has a heart murmur. She also has cardiomegaly, or an enlarged heart, and
She has a lot of love to give.
her heart grew 10 sizes that day. She's like the Grinch.
Yeah.
Except for it's something that could kill her.
Yeah.
So it's really not that cute. It kind of sucks, actually. But it is what it is. She's 8. She's an old lady. She's lived to a respectable age.
She's a lady of a certain age.
She is a lady of a certain age. I felt like I had to take my sunglasses off because whenever we do this, whoever's driving is wearing sunglasses and I'm not.
I feel very personal.
Yeah, I feel like I have to look so you can see my facial expressions.
She has such beautiful expressions, am I right, folks?
That was not a cute one that I just did. I have your food.
Yeah, thank you. So, we covered the tattoo. Did we go into detail about the podcast that you're potentially going to be on?
No, I've only listened to a couple of episodes, but basically the podcast, which is called Fast Forward, God, I hope that I'm calling it the right thing. I'm fairly certain that I am. Wouldn't that be terrible if I wasn't? Hold on, let me quadruple check.
Fact checking.
It's called Note to Self, but that's not the one that I'm doing.
I don't know how much is coming through on the screen here, but we're traveling down a road that we will not name that is particularly rural. So we go one direction out of our apartment complex.
Flash forward. I'm sorry. It's flash forward.
If we go one direction out of our complex, then we get onto the highway taking us urban. If we go just the other direction, then we get into an entirely rural sort of zone. And so there are fields of, there's wine being grown up here.
Yes, and by wine he means grapes.
Wine
No,
grapes.
just the bottles.
Bottles of wine on the vine. All kinds of farm animals. We pass miniature horses.
Hey,
As Sting would say, there's fields.
there are fields.
As we walk in fields of gold.
Oh shoot, am I making it terrible to listen to me chew? I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't even think about that. It might be. It's probably really loud.
Stop that.
Yep, sorry. any suggestions that you guys have are always good suggestions. And so one of the first suggestions that you made was that we get microphones, so that's what we're working with. Hopefully we've got them set in the right spot so they're down a little bit and you can hear clearly, and we're eradicating some of that road noise that we were having issues with.
And please don't test the boundaries the way that I would when she says that any input is good input. That's not really the case. Good input is good input.
Good input is good input. Well, we had quite an adventure yesterday. We went to the Exploratorium in San Francisco, which is like a hands-on science museum.
Yes.
It was kind of interesting because it was more geared towards kids than I expected it to be.
Well, it was, so maybe I just knew that, but what I've always liked about it is that as geared toward kids as it is, I loved every single piece.
Absolutely.
Really, you had a good time?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
You didn't have a good
No, I had a really good time. I was also in the wheelchair, which sort of stops the flow of interactivity. So I am occasionally in a wheelchair, especially for prolonged periods of time, like museums where I have to stand for a whole long time. My body has, my meat cage suffers from something called dysautonomia. So in the background, your body is usually doing all of these regulatory things like keeping your temperature right, keeping your blood pressure at the right level, keeping your heart rate right. My body is sort of haywire constantly. And so what ends up happening if I stand up for too long is I will pass out, or I'll get a really elevated heart rate, I'll go tachycardic. So it's really just a good idea for me to be in a wheelchair. And so that's what I do for prolonged standing situations.
Speaking of wheelchair,
Yes.
those of you who follow Heather on social media might have been exposed to an issue that she was having with her insurance that, because of all of the outcry from you folks, got remedied within 6 hours.
God, yes, it was done fast.
That's awesome.
So I got fitted for a wheelchair, about 6 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
And basically you get physically fitted so that you have a wheelchair that fits and conforms to your body, but then you have a person who goes through your entire medical history and writes up all of the reasons why you need a wheelchair, because they're not inexpensive. In fact, my wheelchair, that out-of-pocket cost is $5,381, so it is an expensive piece of equipment. I mean, that's a car right there. And so you get fitted for the wheelchair, and they come up with your medical history and the reason why you need this wheelchair, and that gets sent to your primary care doctor, and your primary care doctor signs off on it and says, yes, I am in agreement with all of this. This person needs this wheelchair, or this patient, as the case may be. And then it goes to your insurance, and your insurance can either acquiesce and say that yes, they are going to cover it, or
do their jobs.
Actually do their jobs, or they can
Fulfill
say
their promise.
no and say that they're going to deny it. And so basically the wheelchair place who fitted me called me, and they said, well, your insurance says that they're not going to make a decision at all, and what you have to do is you have to buy the wheelchair out of pocket, and then you have to send the bill to the insurance company, and they'll decide from there whether or not they're going to cover a portion of it. And I knew for a fact that my current insurance plan covers 90% of the wheelchair, so I should have been responsible for only 10%. And that was wildly incorrect. We're passing the miniature horses right now, actually. It's the best part. And so, because of you guys on social media resharing my story and just generally being outraged, I was on the phone with somebody from Blue Shield within half an hour. And he fixed it for me. God, I think it was even less than 6 hours. It was probably closer to 2.5 or 3 hours, and it was just done and taken care of.
Well, and honestly, that was only because the people at the wheelchair place were on lunch.
Yes. So, thank you very much. You guys made that happen. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Alright, so we covered the wheelchair. Covered
Oh, but we were talking about the Exploratorium.
Exploratorium.
So we were there because we wanted to see this exhibit called, I can't ever say it correctly.
Strombeest.
Beast?
The guy who was from Strand Beast is how we would anglicize it. But when I was living in Amsterdam, I knew a guy from South Africa, and he was saying that, like, for example, the word wildebeest
Yes.
is pronounced something along the lines of wildebeest. And so I would
we are pronouncing it like this is because the gentleman who is making these amazing sculptures was from Amsterdam. So
He's Dutch.
He's Dutch. So, and let's just talk about the etymology of that for a minute. Dutch and Amsterdam. I mean, they just don't.
Well, so it comes from Deutschland.
Okay.
And that's about all I can say. It doesn't really relate to the word Dutch.
Right.
But for example, there's North Holland and South Holland.
Right.
And then there are other regions within the Netherlands.
Okay.
The Netherlands and Amsterdam and a couple of the other cities that everybody cares about are in North Holland. And so they end up just calling de facto the whole place Holland, even though it's not really.
Well, and see, if you're from Holland, you speak Dutch, right?
You speak Dutch, and you are Dutch. And they would use, they would call themselves, if they're from Amsterdam, they would call themselves an Amsterdammer.
Amsterdammer.
I believe people from Holland call themselves Hollanders.
Yes, I think that sounds correct.
And they would say, God, but that's the thing is, part of this is they speak such good English that I never got.
Wait, brief aside here. Derek studied in Amsterdam. He did his master's degree in Amsterdam.
Yes.
At the
Universiteit van Amsterdam.
So he spent
A year.
a year in Amsterdam studying, and so that's why he has this particular set of knowledge about being in Amsterdam.
Also, but I also have a very poor accent, and I speak almost no Dutch, because the Dutch know so many languages. Just as a matter of course, you go to ask a Dutch person, do you speak English? And they look at you like, yes, I can count to 3. And
We're not very good about that as Americans.
we're not. But the other thing about it is that they tend to be, although they are very, racist, unfortunately, and sort of elitist about being a native versus a non-native. They also are a very transaction-oriented culture, is what I call it. And so, even if you I would try to speak in Dutch, but they would hear my American accent and they would just speak to me in English.
Interesting.
And so I got very little. There was no immersion. There was very little opportunity to really learn Dutch, which I appreciated. That's part of why I chose the Netherlands, or Amsterdam in particular, was because I was really a fraidy cat of trying to learn a language. If I hadn't been doing a master's degree, I think I would have been more up for it. And the master's degree didn't do exactly what I was expecting, so who knows which one of those is more valuable. But.
Yeah, anybody who has listened to our last episode, I can't remember, I think it might have been actually the episode before that where we were talking about, no, that was yesterday, where we were talking about what a smarty pants Derek is, because he did 2 years of high school before going on to college, and then he did his master's degree very early.
1 year program.
He is the most educated person in the car so far.
So far? Are we adding people today?
Well, Mink,
Are we picking people up?
Mink hasn't stopped.
That's true.
She's-
Who says you've stopped?
Well, that's
Who
true.
says I've stopped?
That's true. Okay, wait, pause. If you could go to school right now, dream, study whatever you want, your life is on pause, what would you study?
Can I double major?
You can absolutely double major.
Flying planes and ninja.
Okay, but real college.
Flying planes. I honestly, if I wasn't a veterinarian, I would fly.
You know, there is a college in Florida that is specifically focused on becoming a pilot.
Interesting.
I can't remember what it's called. Embry-Riddle. There we go.
I would do that, or I would do a whole bunch of vocational stuff. Welding, electrical, carpentry.
All the useful stuff.
All the useful stuff, and then I would get a shop, and I would just build stuff.
That's why
Amazing.
sculpture is so great.
Yeah, I bet.
That's why I wish that I could take it, but it's just the
I don't know if she can hear. Can you?
What?
Maybe you have her speak into your microphone when she talks.
apps.
Oh,
Just because there's not a detector on here anymore.
got it. You're right. Hold on,
I don't know how omnidirectional these things are.
I gotta unclip from myself. I got stuck on myself. So we're gonna pass the microphone back to Mink.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was just saying that's why sculpture, which I took last semester, was so satisfying for me. There's something really rewarding about being able to make something with your own hands. So I can definitely second learning vocational things. Welding was particularly fun.
What was it?
Welding. Quite the mind yet for wood building, because that's actually very, I wouldn't say complicated, but you definitely have to think ahead. So lots of respect for all of the people who work in wood out there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's pretty complicated. Derek is sort of an amateur carpenter, and so I have seen some of the work that he's done. And
I would say amateur woodworker more than carpentry. Carpentry specifically is like buildings and stuff. But like, I've built furniture. I've built little doohickeys.
And Mink, when you're holding the microphone, I don't think you have to be super close to your mouth. I think you actually want to be a little bit far away so that you don't want to swallow it. So I'm sorry if we just blew out anybody's ears. We're learning.
Sorry.
And we're also going to order a third lavalier microphone so that we have one for the guest in the back seat.
We just need to call them Langoliers from now on.
Langoliers. Okay, well, I would study forensic science with a minor in photography.
Oh, forensic science. What would be the goal? Would you want to become a forensic pathologist? Or just like a...
Oh god, in a dream world, I would go work at the body farm.
Yeah.
You would work at the body farm, though, as a, like, just data gathering and doing the studies and such? Or you...
We're gonna be late.
Are we? Alright, sorry for that interruption. Phone overheated.
Oh no, we're not gonna be late. We're pretty much gonna be exactly on time. That's awesome.
Beautiful.
Okay, so forensic science, what would I be? Honestly, it would be really, really, really cool to be like a forensic entomologist.
Yes.
But I think that what I'd really want to be is a forensic anthropologist. So I'd like to focus on, the bones.
The bones.
The bones.
Well, yeah, so that's what I was wondering. If you're going to be a forensic anthropologist, then that is like... That's a doctorate plus,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. It's like 8 years of school.
Yeah, at minimum.
Training.
So it would be a lot of work.
Which isn't, bad or anything. It's just, it's a lot of dedication.
It would be very challenging, I think, because I'd have to go back and redo basically all of my undergraduate work.
Well, so what about the fact, though, that, since as we're approaching this year anniversary of having been out of the mortuary industry, when you and I first started dating, you were sort of so in it that it wasn't that you were a nerd to it or anything, but you kind of saw the whole context.
Yes.
And then since then, you've been getting like legitimate PTSD, fear, anxiety, all these other things related to the imagery and all that.
Yeah, I think that there, may be similar difficulties with that. I think that bone would be different to deal with, especially if you're processing the bone. I mean, it's going to be a different situation. But I think that the aspect of an academic setting would be something that really changed you're not going to be seeing the same level of having to repair people who have been shot or having to repair people who have been in...
You're going to see all the parts that really visually and physically resemble people.
Well, and I think also one of the most integral things is you're not going to be dealing with the grief of the family.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're really separated from that.
Yeah.
And I think that in many ways was very hard about what I was doing, is because you have to live up to the expectations that are set by that grief.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
No, I was just thinking back to this case I had the other day where a 3-month-old bulldog came in after having aspirated a bunch of material, and unfortunately it just deteriorated.
Clarify what that means.
So it vomited and then sort of sucked up a bunch of the vomit down into its lungs.
Oh.
And on the x-rays we could only see about 20-ish% of the lungs that were clear of fluid. And unfortunately what happens with aspiration, once that material gets in there, a lot of times inflammation will occur that actually dumps more fluid in rather than draining that fluid. And so that dog deteriorated and ended up needing to be coated, but also ended up needing to be euthanized. And the family was pretty unbelievably devastated, understandably. But I was talking about that case the next morning with this other veterinarian, kind of going over things and figuring out if there was anything that I'd missed or could have done better, etc. And she was kind of focusing mostly on communicating with the owners. And she was like, bulldogs and any short-nosed breed are bred to have respiratory difficulty, and that's a basic function of life, and all we're doing is asking for situations like this.
And the reason that they have difficulties is because they're brachiocephalic is what you call it, right? So they have the squished faces, basically.
Brachy meaning short, cephalic meaning head, so brachycephalic airway syndrome. 4 parts are narrow nostrils, or nares, we call them. Elongated soft palate, which technically it's not elongated, it's just the normal length, but it's in a smush-faced dog. Mm-hmm. A hypoplastic trachea, so the windpipe is instead of the size of a 30 to 40 pound dog, it's the windpipe of a cat, basically, which is only a few millimeters wide. And then the combination of all those 3 increases respiratory pressure as they breathe, and so they can get a 4th problem called everted laryngeal sacules, which are not the tonsils, but it's these other little sacules that kind of pop out into the airway and occlude it even further. And so basically, but even the ones that don't have that, as the diameter of a tube decreases by half, the resistance of flow within that tube goes up by a factor of 4. And so by making that trachea narrower and all those different airways narrower,
and by making it, what he means is as the breeding process happens, and you're looking for these very specific traits in these animals that are being bred.
Because they're cute.
Right.
They look more like fetuses, basically. Everything that we think is cute is because it looks more and more like a fetus. Yep. So, in any case, as those things get narrower, their breathing difficulty gets much, much worse very rapidly. And so their ability to tolerate an insult is going to be somewhere between half as good to 1/16 as good as another breed. So, say that this dog was survived and had not been brachycephalic. In any case, what I was going for was your comment about the emotions of the family and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
That was really what this other veterinarian focused on. When I really sat and thought about it, part of the biggest reasons in this case was weighing on me was specifically because of the emotions of the family. And, my job and your job was so challenging because it takes an unbelievable amount of emotional energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Compassion fatigue is a huge thing, and you and I are both pretty compassionate people.
Yep.
Even as you and I have gotten jaded to some degree, it's necessary to do the job well, or at least to do it well and keep your humanity.
Absolutely. I'm in total agreement. So, that's why, in many ways, I think that it would be pretty drastically different from just an academic standpoint to be in a very clean, austere, purely scientific, purely academic way of looking at, I think you get a whole lot of distance from.
Even if it's an academic endeavor in terms of you're trying to gain factual information, but I would imagine, all of that only matters because those bodies matter to somebody. So unless you're talking about, historical finds, or something like that, you're still going to be dealing with some degree of, there's still going to be kin out there.
Right.
Well, additionally,
Wait.
Sorry. I just want to say a couple of things, although I'm not much for the breeds of dogs that are. What did you say it is again? Brachiocephalic.
I'm sorry.
They do make for interesting skulls, but also I think one thing about the body farm is that the bodies have to be donated by the people who own the bodies, rather before mortem. And I guess for me that would help knowing that in the pursuit of science, these people are okay with their bodies being used that way.
That actually, so 2 things. One, I guess all of this is
farm, you are specifically donating to the body farm.
All right. I've always kind of been interested, actually, in donating my body to the body farm, or at the very least to science in some form.
Yeah, as Derek is saying, when you donate anatomically to science, it can be used for pretty much anything. And in fact, Mary Roach writes some very interesting things in some of her books about what the bodies get put towards. She ended up finding like a particular set of bodies that got put towards like auto accident studies.
Right. People said they wanted to go to science, and they basically got stuck in a Toyota and ran into a wall.
Yeah.
Which is,
For the company, not for like, which I mean, that science is still then going to be potential. I would imagine. Do they have to release that? No. Is that private data then for the company?
no, because I think it ends up being data for the safety standards.
Oh, okay. So I would imagine then they have to communicate all of those findings.
Right, I believe so.
Okay. What was I going to say about that?
Whereas for the body farm, you donate specifically for the body farm.
There was the donating. There was.
So, and apparently the body farm itself has a list that is so long that it is, they're not even accepting new people. Or the one in Tennessee.
On that farm.
Yeah, the original one in Tennessee.
That's funny. Oh, I was just going to bring up the sordid history of every major medical school in the country has some, at least one, if not a number of scandals relating to grave robbing and other stuff back from when there was a shortage of bodies for people to get experience on.
What podcast is it that we were listening to that was on? 99% Invisible?
I think it was that, or maybe Radio Lab, or
It was pretty fascinating talking about how pretty much all of them, because there was a period of time where you couldn't get bodies. I mean, every single medical school in the country resorted to grave robbing in order to get their bodies.
or at least paying people while looking the other way with bodies that were clearly
Being robbed.
or potentially people who are just being murdered specifically for that purpose.
Ugh, that's so gross and gnarly. Ugh. See, and that's why I am uncomfortable when people have human skulls.
Yeah.
I don't think that human skulls deserve to be kept. I think that everybody deserves to be laid to rest. And I mean, even when you're donated to science, you're eventually cremated and scattered at sea, or your body is interred in some way. You get an end.
Is it that it's an end, or is it that it's not being, because, to an extent, all of our material gets used somehow, you know what I mean? It gets turned into other creatures, or it gets turned into minerals, or whatever.
Right.
So, you say laid to rest, and it's interesting you use that terminology in particular, which makes sense from being a mortician, but being an atheist and being somebody who doesn't, I've always been really interested in your perspective on remains, and
I think it's a respect thing.
who is that respect to, and why is that respect important?
I think it's twofold. I think that it is respect to the body and the vessel that the body is, and that it belonged to somebody, and that somebody had a full and fulfilling life, and I think that person just deserves a certain level of respect. But I think that there's also a level of respect towards the family, or whatever next of kin that family has left. Like the UC Davis body program, they have, and they started doing this within the last 10 years, they have basically an annual event where the families of people who have donated their bodies can come, and they tell stories, and they share pictures, and people can set up the memorials, and they have an entire memorial program specifically for these families, because it's important. It's important to know that the bodies were used in a way that was respectful, that the bodies were used in a way that's going to further science, but then that the bodies were, cremated and scattered at sea, and that there was a level of respect in their interment, that they weren't just, thrown.
Yeah. The bodies were and are.
Can
Sorry.
you say that one more time?
Just that the bodies were and still are people.
Yeah, I mean, just because...
And that's part of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Do you believe that they still are people?
I believe that the people that they were is so integral that it overrides the fact that it's ultimately just, meat. That spiritual aspect of it is just really, really important.
So it's interesting. You keep using words that, okay, so just when I think that I'm understanding. So when you say spiritual, do you believe in something spiritual?
I think that humans are inherently spiritual. I think that we wouldn't care about what happened to bodies if we aren't spiritual on some level. And I think that you can be spiritual without being religious. I think that a lot of people conflate the two, and they're not meant to be conflated.
So separating it out even from religion, though, if you're sort of if you're an atheist,
I'm an atheist.
then what do you mean by spiritual? What do you believe in a spirit?
I believe in a soul. I absolutely believe in a soul.
Okay.
I think that there is some sort of unique spark of humanity and the existence that exists that we have not been able to pinpoint or understand as to why it is and what it is, but it is what makes us human.
Do you think that it persists beyond death?
No. I'm torn on it. I genuinely don't think so, no.
Okay.
I think that it's usually the person who is left behind their mind can be a very powerful thing in making it seem as though that spirit exists after death, but I think that when you're gone, you're gone.
Okay. So then, if I'm hearing you right, what it comes down to is that without there being necessarily a creator or religious guidelines for how to live your life, etc., we haven't you don't feel like we've gotten that right, but there is something unique and inherently valuable about the individual or the personhood, which I know you also apply to animals, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the personhood or individualism or whatever it is, selfhood, that is unique and valuable enough that the body associated with it still deserves some degree of reverence.
Absolutely.
And
respect.
And that persists even if the kin
even if the kin don't exist.
Or exactly. Okay.
Yeah. I think that it comes down to specifically to honoring that person and who that person was and what that life was and that life existed.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Bless you. Thank you.
And on that note, we are at our destination.
Gonna go get tattooed.
So, thank you for joining us again this particular time. I'm not even going to say week or day because
you never know when we're gonna record.
We never know. All right, guys.